Book 2 Crimes and Penalties. Crimes against National Security and Laws of Nations. Chapter 1 Crimes against National Security. Section 1 Treason and Espionage. Article 114 Treason. Any Filipino citizen who levies war against the Philippines or adheres to her enemies, giving them aid or comfort within the Philippines or elsewhere, shall be punished by reclusion perpetua to death, and shall pay a fine not to exceed 100,000 pesos. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses at least to the same overt act, or on confession of the accused in open court. Likewise, an alien residing in the Philippines who commits acts of treason as defined in paragraph 1 of this article shall be punished by reclusion temporal to death and shall pay a fine not to exceed 100,000 pesos, as amended by Section 2 of Republic Act No. 7659. Article 115 Conspiracy and Proposal to Commit Treason. Penalty. The conspiracy or proposal to commit the crime of treason shall be punished respectively by prisión mayor and a fine not exceeding 10,000 pesos, and prisión correccional and a fine not exceeding 5,000 pesos. Article 116 Misprision of Treason. Every person owing allegiance to the United States, the government of the Philippine Islands, without being a foreigner and having knowledge of any conspiracy against them, conceals or does not disclose and make known the same as soon as possible to the governor or fiscal of the province or the mayor or fiscal of the city in which he resides, as the case may be, he shall be punished as an accessory to the crime of treason. Article 117 Espionage. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be inflicted upon any person who, number 1, without authority therefore enters a warship, fort, or naval or military establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plans, photographs, or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippine archipelago, or, number 2, being in possession, by reason of the public office he holds, of the articles, data, or information referred to in the preceding paragraph, discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. The penalty, next higher in degree, shall be imposed in the offender be a public officer or employee. Section 2. Provoking war and disloyalty in case of war. Article 118. Inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. The penalty of reclusion temporal shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee, and that of prisión mayor upon any private individuals who by unlawful or unauthorized acts provokes or gives occasion for a war, involving or liable to involve the Philippine Islands or exposes Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Article 119 Violation of Neutrality. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be inflicted upon anyone who, on the occasion of a war in which the government is not involved, violates any regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. Article 120 Correspondence with hostile country. Any person who in the time of war shall have correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops shall be punished. Number 1. By prisión correccional, if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government. Number 2. By prisión mayor, if the correspondence be carried on in ciphers or conventional signs. And number 3. By reclusión temporal, if notice or information be given thereby, which might be useful to the enemy, if the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, he shall suffer the penalty of reclusión temporal to death. Article 121 Flight to enemy's country. The penalty of arresto mayor shall be inflicted upon any person who, owing allegiance to the government, attempts to flee or go to an enemy country when prohibited by competent authority. Section 3. Piracy and mutiny on the high seas in Philippine waters. Article 122. Piracy in general and mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. The penalty of reclusion perpetua shall be inflicted upon any person who, on the high seas or in Philippine waters, shall attack or seize a vessel, or not being a member of its complement, nor a passenger, shall seize the whole or part of the cargo of said vessel, its equipment, or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. The same penalty shall be inflicted in case of mutiny on the high seas or in Philippine waters. RA number 7659. Article 123. Qualified piracy. The penalty of reclusion perpetua to death shall be imposed upon those who commit any of the crimes referred to in the preceding article under any of the following circumstances. Number 1. Whenever they have seized a vessel by boarding or firing upon the same. Number 2. Whenever the pirates have abandoned their victims without means of saving themselves. Or, number 3, whenever the crime is accompanied by murder, homicide, physical injuries, or rape, as amended by RA number 7659. Title 2. Crimes against the fundamental law of the state. Chapter 1. Arbitrary detention or expulsion, violation of dwelling, prohibition, interruption, and dissolution of peaceful meeting, and crimes against religious worship. Section 1. Arbitrary detention and expulsion. Article 124. Arbitrary detention. Any public officer or employee who, without legal grounds, detains a person shall suffer, number 1, the penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period, to prisión correccional in its minimum period, if the detention has not exceeded 3 days. Number 2, the penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods if the detention has continued more than 3 but not more than 15 days. Number 3, the penalty of prisión mayor if the detention has continued for more than 15 days but not more than 6 months. And number 4, that of reclusión temporal if the detention shall have exceeded 6 months. The commission of a crime or violent insanity or any other ailment requiring the compulsory confinement of the patient in a hospital shall be considered legal grounds for the detention of any person. Article 125. Delay in the delivery of detained persons to the proper judicial authorities. The penalties provided in the next preceding articles shall be imposed upon the public officer or employee who shall detain any person for some legal ground and shall fail to deliver such person to the proper judicial authorities within the period of 12 hours for crimes or offenses punishable by light penalties, or their equivalent, 18 hours for crimes or offenses punishable by correctional penalties, or their equivalent, and 36 hours for crimes or offenses punishable by afflictive or capital penalties, or their equivalent. In every case, the person detained shall be informed of the cause of his detention and shall be allowed upon his request to communicate and confer at any time with his attorney or counsel, as amended by Executive Orders Number 59, November 7, 1986, and Number 272, July 25, 1987. Article 126. Delaying release. The penalties provided for in Article 124 shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who delays for the period of time specified therein the performance of any judicial or executive order for the release of a prisoner, or detention prisoner, or unduly delays the service of the notice of such order to said prisoner, or the proceedings upon any petition for the liberation of such person. Article 127. Expulsion. The penalty of prisión correccional shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, not being thereunto authorized by law, shall expel any person from the Philippine Islands or shall compel such person to change his residence. Section 2. Violation of domicile. Article 128. Violation of domicile. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, not being authorized by judicial order, shall enter any dwelling against the will of the owner thereof. Search papers or other effects found therein without the previous consent of such owner, or having superstitiously entered said dwelling, and being required to leave the premises, shall refuse to do so. In the offense be committed in the nighttime, or if any papers or effects not constituting evidence of a crime be not returned immediately after the search made by the offender, the penalty shall be prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods. Article 129. Search warrants maliciously obtained and abuse in the service of those legally obtained. In addition to the liability attaching to the offender for the commission of any other offense, the penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period, and the fine not exceeding 1,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall procure a search warrant without just cause, or, having legally procured the same, shall exceed his authority or use unnecessary severity in executing the same. Article 130. Searching domicile without witnesses. The penalty of arresto mayor in its medium and maximum periods shall be imposed upon a public officer or employee who, in cases where a search is proper, shall search the domicile, papers, or other belongings of any person. In the absence of the latter, any member of his family, or in their default, without the presence of two witnesses residing in the same locality. Section 3. Prohibition, interruption, and dissolution of peaceful meetings. Article 131. Prohibition, interruption, and dissolution of peaceful meetings. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who, without legal ground, shall prohibit or interrupt the holding of a peaceful meeting or shall dissolve the same. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall hinder any person from joining any lawful association or from attending any of its meetings. The same penalty shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall prohibit or hinder any person from addressing either alone or together with others any petition to the authorities for the correction of abuses or redress of grievances. Section 4. Crimes against religious worship. Article 132. Interruption of religious worship. The penalty of prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon any public officer or employee who shall prevent or disturb the ceremonies or manifestations of any religion. If the crime shall have been committed with violence or threats, the penalty shall be prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods. Article 133. Offending the religious feelings. The penalty of arresto mayor in its maximum period to prisión correccional in its minimum period shall be imposed upon anyone who in a place devoted to religious worship or during the celebration of any religious ceremony shall perform acts notoriously offensive to the feelings of the faithful.